Alright, I am back with another video, and today I am doing a build request, the Cryomancer. I've been asked a few times to do sort of a Cryomancer build, so something focusing on ice magic, or maybe like an ice fire build, and I'm kind of deciding to encompass that all in one. While this build is only going to be focused on ice damage, however, you will see there is plenty of opportunities to also gain fire damage as well throughout this video, and as such you could make a fire and ice build with this, but today I mainly wanted to focus on the cryomancy aspect, as that specific request has come up a few times, so I hope the people who requested it enjoy this build. As far as the gameplay side of things goes, this is actually one of the most fun builds you can do. Playing around with the icy surfaces and various status conditions, because there's like 3 or 4 status conditions revolving around ice, and we will get all of them here, so you can really see this as like a battlefield control type of high damage build. It's super fun, and if you want an interesting duo combination, actually, I would recommend pairing this build with my Hellfire Pyromancer, which you can go and find on the channel. It's one of my earlier videos, to have a really unique fire and ice dynamic. I might actually do maybe another type of elemental mage, maybe to complete the trifecta I might do lightning next. That could be fun. But anyways, let's get into this build. So we are going to be starting off as a sorcerer. We're not going to be here very long, as we're only really here for a few important utility options. Let's start off with the cantrips. First off, I'm going to suggest you take our utility cantrips friends, Blade Water Mage Hand, and perhaps Minor Illusion as well. Obviously we see Rare Frost is here, but as you can kind of tell by our stats, Charisma is not our primary spellcasting stat, so there's no reason to get Rare Frost here, especially when we can reach level 2 so quickly. Next up for our spells, we're just taking a couple of utility options here, that being Shield, one of the better utility options in the game, and Featherfall, which is amazing for traversal. Obviously, we are going to be going with Draconic Bloodline, although Storm Sorcery could work if you wanted to go that route to get the ability to fly. However, I want to go Draconic Bloodline for a very specific reason. We're going to be grabbing the White Dragon Ancestry in order to grab Armour of Agathis. This is one of the only ice spells we could have potentially missed, but now we're going to be getting it, and it's a pretty good one. You gain 5 temporary hit points and deal 5 cold damage to any creature that hits you with a melee attack, and this stacks for every spell slot cast, and since we're going to be reaching the maximum amount of spell slots, we'll be able to get a lot of tankiness and extra cold damage out of this build, so it's absolutely worth grabbing this spell. As for our Draconic Bloodline, this is kind of what I've gone for here with the face. You kind of get these like kind of white scales with the frosty blue highlights in the hair, and this is a Drow Half-Elf, and this is actually one of the natural skin colours for a Drow Half-Elf, so I felt like this is actually a super cool looking build. It kind of reminds me of Priscilla from Dark Souls. Really cool. I quite like it. In fact, I actually quite like the silver tone on the scales there. I think that looks absolutely awesome. As for the skills, let's get into it real quickly. We're only going to be having Charisma and Wisdom at 10 each. We are going to be using both of these stats a little bit, but only for grabbing some utility spells, not our main damage source, which is going to be our Intelligence, putting that up to a 16, because this is mainly a wizard build, so we're going to want to be grabbing a 16 in Intelligence, as that is going to be our main spellcasting stat, although I can see it being put up to a 17 and using Ethel's Boon to push it up to an 18, which is actually what I'm going to do with this build, because we are going to be a little bit feat hungry with this one, so we want to get the most out of it. So put this to 17 and grab Ethel's Boon to push it up to 18 total. Next up is going to be our Constitution, bumping that up to a 16 to get the most possible health possible. This is going to make us a bit more tanky, especially since this build can actually be up close and personal. And finally, we're going to probably have a bit of a weird one here. In fact, actually, I think we can bump Wisdom down to 8, because we're literally only using it for one spell. And we can bump our Dexterity up to 14. So yes, a bit of a weird stat spread here, but the fact that we can get our Dexterity to a decent score, our Constitution to a decent score, our Intelligence to an 18 total of Ethel's Boon, and a Charisma of 10, I feel like this works really well for us. So, as for our skill proficiencies, I went with the Sage background for Arcana and History, but so we can also grab Deception and Persuasion here, so we have that little bit of extra juice in Dialogue. Right, next up at level 2, we're going to be doing a quick dip over to another subclass just to get our last little piece of utility that we need for this build, and we are going with Cleric. This is going to allow us to grab a few useful cantrips, that being Resistance, Guidance, and Thaumaturgy, our dialogue cantrips. We're also going to be able to grab our Domain here, and we're absolutely going Tempest, just because it feels like it's a bit more on theme. This will get us to Wrath of the Storm, which as a reaction strike back against an attacking creature, dealing lightning or thunder damage, and the target takes half damage on a saving throw. Yes, our wisdom is really low, so we're very rarely going to get the full damage out of this. However, we might as well have just that little bit of extra damage, and it's probably the closest subclass that's on theme. However, any of these other ones, perhaps if you want to go nature or war, can also work, but Tempest just gets what I really want here, and also... Well, sorry, I'm a bit all over the place. But mainly the reason we're going Cleric here is for the armor proficiencies. This is going to give us light, medium, shields, and heavy, which Sorcerer would not normally get. So you have a lot more customization options with this build. I have medium armor here, but you could absolutely go for heavy armor if you'd like, because Tempest Domain gives heavy armor. So that's that's the main reason I suggest it. As for your deity, since we're mainly a wizard, we might as well go Mystra. From my understanding, none of these guys really deal in cold damage. Maybe Tiamat if you want to go for one of the heads, but I'm going to go with Mystra here. And of course we get our one prepared spell, which is very obviously going to be Create or Destroy Water. For those of you that don't know, if you make your enemies wet and then hit them with an ice attack, they are vulnerable to it, meaning they will do double damage. But also, if you're casting something that has the ability to inflict the chilled status effect, which we will obviously be doing, you can actually completely freeze your enemies, unlocking a new status effect called Frozen, which makes them completely immobile and vulnerable to melee damage, so absolutely worth picking this up. You could also even create, if you're not too into grabbing this level of Cleric, you can actually create water surfaces by melting your own ice, however way you want to do that, but I feel like just picking this up here for the armor efficiencies and this spell makes a lot of sense. And again, since this is a spell that doesn't have like a spell save DC, this will work just fine. And now we're going to be jumping into our main class. Again, we can take these levels in any order we like. It really doesn't matter. If you feel like you want to grab this Cleric level maybe after grabbing a few levels in Wizard, you can absolutely do that here. But speaking of, we are going to be jumping over to Wizard now for the rest of our levels, because this is the way we're going to be getting all of our ice spells, because Wizard gets the most ice related spells in the game, and it's the only class that can get the level 6 ice spells. However, obviously we've already taken enough multi-class dips otherwise to not be able to get those spells, but because we are a wizard, we can learn spells from scrolls, and the level 6 ice spells are available from scrolls, so you will still be able to learn them, you just have to find the scrolls. And those two spells are Otterluke's Freezing Sphere and Wall of Ice, both of which I have personally found as scrolls in this game, even as early as Act 1, depending on, like, if you get lucky. So you can find these scrolls quite easily. So yeah, basically this is the best way to get every single ice spell in the game, and then some. So let's get into the actual spells that we get without scrolls. First up, our cantrips. Obviously we want Ray of Frost. This is a big one. We absolutely need this spell if we want to have a solid ranged ice option that we always have access to regardless of our remaining spell slots. And the rest can be whatever you like. We already have most of our utility cantrips here, so we can grab light to be able to give ourselves a little bit of light. And if you want to kind of reflavor Bone Chill as being like the chill of death and pretend you're doing ice damage, this works. It basically is just a way to give disadvantage on attack rolls to our opponents and deal a damage type that isn't cold, and just in case our enemy is resistant to it. So this is about as close as we get. Now next up for our spells, well, we have a few options here, but the obvious one is Ice Knife. This is our main ice damage spell. At level 1, it is going to be super powerful. It does piercing and cold damage and creates an icy surface, and explodes and hits everyone around the target. Super awesome spell that is perfectly on theme. We're also going to be able to grab Enhanced Leap, Long Strider, and Disguise Self, our utility spells here that are super great to have on any build. Magic Missile for a solid non-ice damage option if you need it. And your last spell can be whatever you like. If you want to grab Chromatic Orb, because you can throw an ice variant of this that creates a nice surface, but obviously it would also give you access to other damage types if you find that something is too resistant to ice and you don't have a good way around it. This can be used to also create a Fire Orb as well that can melt your ice if you want to create water surfaces that way. So if we're going for that fire and ice build, this also works here. And for our prepared spells, I do quite like these options here. Next up at Wizard level 2, we're going to be choosing our subclass, and there is only one thing for it. We are going Evocation. This is going to give us a ton of useful features, but the most useful feature is when we get straight at level 2, that being Sculpt spells. Create pockets of safety within your Evocation spells. Allies automatically succeed their saving throws against these spells and take no damage from them, meaning that since a lot of our ice spells do massive area of effect damage, there's no risk that your allies are going to be caught up in them, so this is super important to grab, and is going to make all of our ice spells more powerful in the long run. Next up, we get to choose a couple more spells, and it's really up to you what you grab here. I quite like Find Familiar just to get that extra little pet, because that's always fun. I think the last spell can be literally whatever you want. We've kind of run out of things that are on theme, so I don't know. I mean, we already have Fog Cloud. That could kind of be like a Misty Cloud, but we already have it. Color Spray, I don't know. Like, just pick whatever you want. It really doesn't matter. Let's go with Expeditious Retreat. I don't know. You never know when you might need to run away. And yeah, we'll just keep... we'll grab Magic Missile. Next up at Wizard level 3, we're going to be gaining level 2 spells, and there's a couple of things that I kind of like here. So obviously Misty Step is a powerful utility spell that you can kind of flavor as Mist Walking, but also I want to grab Phantasmal Force. Now that may seem like a bit of an odd choice, but let's actually read it. Deal damage to a creature each turn. The type of damage changes to the last type the creature suffered. So you can cast this spell, then cast an ice spell, and then it's almost as if you've frozen them and they've got frostbite, taking cold damage every turn. We haven't got many concentration spells yet, so this actually is quite a decent early concentration option that I feel like can actually be on theme. We're also going to be... so we'll slot these two in. Yeah, perfect. Next up, at Wizard level 4, we're going to be grabbing our first feat, and of course, if at this point you probably would have laid the smackdown on Auntie Ethel, so bumping your intelligence up to a 19, total 20 with Ethel's Boon is going to work really nicely here, meaning that we have maxed out our intelligence already, which is awesome, exactly what we're looking for. Also, we can grab another cantrip at this level. Again, take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. I'm just going to grab Shocking Grasp so that we have a melee option. We can also grab a couple of more level 2 spells here, and I'm going to recommend Gust of Wind, because you can kind of blow a bit of frosty air at your opponents and force them off balance, which will make it a bit easier for them to slip on your ice. And then your second spell from here can be whatever you really like. There's nothing here that immediately speaks to me, so picking up a nice utility spell like Mirror Image to give yourself a bit more tankiness can absolutely work out. And yeah, we'll grab that. Perfect. Next up at Wizard level 5, we're going to be grabbing some level 3 spells, and there's two really obvious ones. Sleet Storm is going to allow you to call forth a storm that disrupts the concentration of spellcasters, douses fires, and creates a massive ice surface. It does require your concentration, however I feel like this is a good spell to have for shutting down spellcasters and is on theme. And the other one I'm going to tell you to grab is Glyph of Warding. This lets you set a trap, which can be a cold, icy trap. Glyph of Warding is a super fun spell. If you've not tried it before, give it a go. It can give you some really interesting battlefield strategies, like if you set up like a Glyph of Warding in a doorway, forcing your enemies to come through it, and then them falling for your trap. It's super fun, so I quite like having Glyph of Warding here, especially since it doesn't require concentration to maintain the glyph. And we'll grab these both. Next up at Wizard level 6, we're going to be getting our subclass feature, that being Potent Cantrip. Your cantrips become harder to evade entirely. When a creature succeeds its saving throw against one of your cantrips, it still takes half the cantrip's damage but suffers no additional effects, so our Ray of Frost is going to be getting a nice little buff here. We're also going to be able to grab two more spells, and for spells that I feel like are on theme, I would recommend Slow. You can kind of flavor this as you are calling forth an Icy Blizzard, which causes enemies to become colder and therefore slowing them down. You can target up to 6 creatures and slow them. Movement speed and actions are affected, and their AC and dexterity saves are reduced by 2. With those dexterity saves being reduced, they are much more likely to slip on your icy surfaces, meaning they're going to be prone a lot and lose their turns. This is a super powerful control spell with this setup. And the other option is Counterspell. I mean, it's just a good overall option to have that doesn't really break the theme, but isn't really on it either. Now, obviously, on most of my sorcerers, I would recommend Haste, because obviously, or not sorcerers, wizards or spellcasters, I would recommend Haste, but I don't think it works too well here, since so many of our ice spells are concentration-based, so your chances of, basically, if you cast Haste, you are limiting yourself to pretty much not using any of the kit that we're actually here to build, so I feel like that doesn't work as well. But with slow and other ice spells, we're going to be doing a lot of cool stuff. I will slot those in. Yes, lovely. Now at Wizard level 7, we're going to be getting some more spells, our level 4 spells, and of course the obvious choice here is Ice Storm. Impel a storm of hail and ice to crash from the sky, covering the ground and striking all objects within range, basically creating a big icy surface, and also, you know, dealing a ton of cold and bludgeoning damage. The other spell that comes up, obviously, is Fire Shield, allowing yourself to surround yourself in a shield of cold, meaning that that makes you resistant to fire or cold damage, depending on which one you choose, and will cause any melee attacks against you to be retaliated at with cold damage. Stacking this with Armour of Agathis makes it so if an enemy dares to come close to you and hit you, they're going to be taking a lot of cold damage in retaliation. And the best part about Fire Shield is it doesn't require your concentration, so it just is an extra buff to your output. Might as well slot these in. Kind of running out of decent slots here, I would say. There's so many good spells for this build. At Wizard level 8, we're going to be able to grab a couple more spells, and I also believe, yes, we're at level 5 spell slots at this point, and there's another quite obvious choice here. We can grab Conjure Minor Elemental, which will mean we can summon 2 Ice Methods, and now the Ice Methods have some interesting abilities. I will show them off at the end of the video, but it's super on theme that we get to summon little ice minions. We are truly a Frost Witch. Next up, this is where it gets a bit tricky because it isn't really an on-theme spell that immediately stands out, but I quite like grabbing Gaseous Form. Basically, you can turn yourself or an ally into a tiny gas cloud. It can't fall, it fits through small openings, and is very hard to damage. The cloud has advantage on Constitution, Dexterity, and Strength saving throws, and it lasts until a long rest as long as you maintain concentration. Basically, turn yourself into a little ball of frosty mist and be able to fly around and engage with with the environment in many unique ways. It's a super fun spell, and I absolutely recommend it. We're also going to be grabbing another feat at this level, and because we will have our intelligence maxed out at this point with Ethel's Boon, obviously we want to grab Elemental Adept Cold to be able to ignore resistance to cold damage, meaning now we can finally use our full power even against enemies that are going to be that would normally give us trouble. Obviously, if you're happy to have 18 int for a while there, if you want to grab this first, obviously that works, but I quite like bumping up our intelligence first and then grabbing this later. Next up at Wizard level 9, we're finally going to be getting level 5 spells, which means we get to grab the 2 obvious choices, that being Cone of Cold, just a massive amount of ice damage and a cone in front of you, and also Conjure Elemental to be able to summon either a Water Elemental or a Water Myrmidon to be able to deal even more ice damage per turn and gain another companion, meaning that you can now have 3 summoned entities that are all ice themed at once, which is super powerful and really fun. We can slot these in here. What should we drop? Mirror Image. And our final level is Wizard level 10. Again, you could get here sooner if you maybe dropped for Cleric level, but this is kind of alright to get now anyway. We get our final subclass feature being Empowered Evocation. Your grasp of Evocation magic has tightened. You can now add your Intelligence modifier to the damage rolls with any Evocation spells, meaning that every single one of our spells just got a hell of a lot more powerful. We're also going to be able to grab another cantrip at this level. There's nothing here that's really on theme, but if you wanted to grab Firebolt, kind of going against the theme here, but again, it could melt your ice, creating water surfaces, allowing you to freeze, unfreeze, and refreeze as much as you like. We can also grab a couple more spells at this point. Again, normally this is where we'd be grabbing our level 6 spells, but because we are getting those from scrolls, we can't really grab them here, unfortunately, and there's not really any more spells that are exactly on theme, so it becomes a pick your favorites type of moment, maybe just grabbing some utility options that you don't have. I quite like Telekinesis. Maybe you can flavor this as you're not actually manipulating ice just on its own, you're actually just creating ice and then manipulating it with psychic ability like Telekinesis, but I understand that that is a stretch, but I still quite like Telekinesis here. It is just one of the more fun spells in the game. And your last option again can be whatever you like. There's nothing here that really stands out to me. So something maybe like Hold Person or Hold Monster. You can flavor it as kind of freezing it in ice, making them unable to move. But again, it's up to you. And I'll grab Telly, because I like Telly. And that is the build. Now, again, like I said at the start of this video, this is one of the most fun spellcasting kind of classes, I guess, in the game, as far as being able to use our ice magic to inflict status conditions and deal a bunch of interesting kind of control effects, like our icy surfaces or being able to freeze our enemies. But it gets even more interesting when we get into the equipment. So let's go over it now. We have the Cold Brim Hat. I featured this once before and I'm doing so again. Once per turn, with any condition inflicted on a target, it also applies 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. Encrusted with Frost, the affected entity has disadvantage on dexterity saving throws, which is huge. That means they're going to slip on our ice even more. When there are 7 or more turns remaining, the entity must succeed a Constitution saving throw or take 1 to 4 cold damage and become frozen. Frozen, as I said before, the affected entity is utterly enameled in ice and is incapacitated. If it is dealt bludgeoning, thunder, or force damage, the ice shatters, ending the condition. And of course, incapacitated means, well, it just means they cannot move at all. It is also removed by the burning status effect. Now, we are going to have other ways of dealing frozen other than having to stack 7 turns of this, but it is just a nice little buff that we get as well. Next up, we have the Cloak of Protection. It is just a nice extra option to get us that little bit of extra armor class, bumping us up to a 20 total, and looks pretty good with this armor, in my opinion, when you color it right. Next up is the 1T Scale Mail. This adds your full dexterity modifier to your armor class, which unfortunately doesn't really matter because we're just having a +2 bonus anyway, so it's not really changed. But additionally, this armor does not impose disadvantage on stealth checks, and you get a +1 bonus to initiative rolls, allowing you to set up a bit quicker. This is just one of my favorite looking kind of armor options that you can get really easily in Act 2. It is one of the most fashionable and one of the most useful across the board. So again, I just love showing it off here. Those of you who have come from my Dancer of Elistre build, or Elistre, I don't know, I keep fucking it up. You'll recognize this armor piece, but I colored that in purple, whereas now I have kind of an icy light blue dye instead, which is what it's called, the light blue dye. And I really feel like it looks so good with this build. But obviously, when you're in Act 3, if you want something a little bit different, and I really hope this doesn't get me sort of age restricted or something, you have the Wave Mother's Robe, which will give you resistance to fire and cold damage. If the wearer is standing on a water surface at the start of their turn, they heal 1 to 4 hit points. Again, most of the time we're going to have icy surfaces, so this doesn't come up much, but it does let you cast Create or Destroy Water and gives you a little bonus to your armor class. And even though it's clothing, we are a Draconic Sorcerer, so we do have unarmored defense. But again, this just feels weird, and I don't like wearing it, so I'm just going to go back to the 1T Scale Mail personally, but that is an option for those of you out there. You know who I'm talking about. Anyways, with that, let's move on to the gloves. We have Winter's Clutches. When the wearer deals cold damage, inflict 2 turns of Encrusted with Frost. This stacks with our Cold Brim Hat, meaning you're going to be able to stack up those Encrusted with Frost kind of counters super quickly. And of course, since we're pretty much always dealing cold damage, you're going to be able to get off those Nova kind of explosions of Frozen pretty often. And finally, the Disintegrating Nightwalkers. Now, there's a good reason for it this time. I know this is just like the one I use all the time, but it actually makes a lot of sense here because this is going to prevent us from slipping on our own ice, in addition to being able to cast Misty Step. I mean, it would be so stupid if we're creating all of these ice surfaces only to fall on our ass whenever we go near them, so it absolutely makes sense to be able to have these here to stop that from happening. Onto our accessories even, we're going to be going to the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals cold damage, amongst others, you add your spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt, basically meaning our Ray of Frost is going to be able to do a ton of damage. This is like Agonizing Blast, but for elemental cantrips. Next up, the Ring of Free Action. Even though we have the Disintegrating Nightwalkers, the ice surfaces are still counted as difficult terrain and will slow our movement, so if we have the Ring of Free Action, we ignore those effects and also cannot be paralyzed or restrained. This basically means that we are completely unaffected by our own ice surfaces in every regard, which is awesome. And finally, the Snowburst Ring. When the wearer deals cold damage, they also create a 4.5 meter circle of ice around the target, or targets, plural. So basically this means you're going to be able to create even more ice surfaces beyond just the spells that actually create them, meaning you're going to have a ton of different options for stacking those ice surfaces all over the battlefield, making your enemies trip and fall over and basically be unable to do anything. This is probably one of the best control mages I've ever made. I'm also, since we have our shield proficiency, I thought I would point this one out. This is the Absolute Protector. You can get this in Act 2. If the wearer bears the Absolute brand, all damage received from spells is reduced by 1, so it's a bit more tankiness, and I would absolutely recommend getting the brand anyway. You get the standard shield bash, but you also get the ability to cast Fire Shield Chill once per long rest without expending a spell slot, allowing you to get that buff anyway, and that's on theme, and still be able to use the spell slots for other things. But here's my favourite part of the build. The Morning Frost. You can get this in Act 1 by completing a little Easter egg hunting side quest, which is honestly really fun. I love it when these builds come with extra little challenges for you to do to be able to build them. And you're going to get a ton of interesting stuff. First of all, this is going to give you a little bit of extra cold damage on melee attacks, so if you're out of spell slots, you're not out of options. You're also going to get Heart of Ice. When dealing cold damage, you always deal an additional 1 cold damage, meaning everything is getting a little buff. With Insidious Cold, dealing cold damage with a spell possibly inflicts chilled upon the target. The affected entity becomes vulnerable to cold damage and resistant to fire damage, but basically that means we can get our double damage with our ice spells without needing to do the whole water setup if you don't want to go for that Cleric dip, but I still recommend doing that for everything else I've illustrated, but this is still a nice thing because if we inflict this chilled effect, that also means we're going to be getting our stacks of Encrusted with Frost as well. It's a +1 weapon, and also you get to just cast Ray of Frost for free without needing to actually take it as a spellcaster, but that's a bit pointless for us. But say if you wanted to build like maybe a Frosty Way of the Four Elements monk, you could get this and actually it would be super cool. And finally, our final weapon option here is just the Darkfire Shortbow. If we're not going with the Wave Mother's Robe, which I personally would not, you can just have this equipped in your off slots to be able to get a little bit of haste if you want it, but it's not really important because we're mainly here for the resistance to fire and cold damage and the +2 enchantment. We can't actually use it because we're not proficient with bows, but we're still going to be able to do that little extra cast of haste regardless, so we don't need proficiency, and it still gives us the resistances for free, so there's no reason not to have it in that off slot. So yeah, I mean, that's the build. It is super, super fun. You are going to have complete control over the battlefield. Your enemies are going to feel absolutely helpless as they're stumbling around and slipping on your ice, and you're going to be doing a ton of damage, basically making all your enemies take double damage from your ice spells. It is super, super fun, and like I say, if you grab the scrolls for the final 6 level spells, you will be able to cast them. Again, that is Odaluk's Freezing Sphere, and, Wall of Ice, which are 2 powerful spells in their own right. Now I'm going to quickly, before we move on to the kind of end of video stuff, let's get into the summons. So you have the option, if you want to spend a 5th level spell slot, to conjure the Water Elemental, which conjures an elemental which can use Winter's Breath, which is just a decent amount of cold damage. Slam, which will do an extra little bit of cold damage with bludgeoning damage as well. And, you know, that's basically it, but what we're really here for is the Water Myrmidon. This is going to give you Hymeal's Strike if I summon this guy. Actually, we can have a look. You can see he has a decent chunk of HP. Looks really cool. Wields like a trident, which is awesome. And again, you're going to get Hymeal's Strike, which allows you to pierce your creature with your frost-rimmed trident, dealing a ton of cold damage and piercing damage, while also being able to inflict chilled as well, so that's just another way to stack that on top if we don't inflict it ourselves. We also gain Explosive Icicle. Hurl 3 tridents forged of glistening ice that pierce the targets and create ice surfaces on impact. This is if Ice Knife and Scorching Ray fused to create an awesome ice spell. You also gain the ability to teleport and heal yourself with Healing Vapors. Exude water vapors in your general elemental dampness, healing nearby creatures. If you are poisoned, the water is tainted, and instead of healing, it deals poison damage, which is an interesting little bit of interactivity. And obviously you just have a regular main hand attack that also does cold damage, but honestly, just use your ice abilities. In addition to this, we can also cast... Where is it? Where is it? Did I forget to prepare it? Whoops, hold on. Our ice elementals. There it is. Let's stitch Magic Missile for now, and we'll show off this spell as well. Yep. We can conjure our ice methods. Now, you may only see one, but once they start moving, they will split up and become 2. They will split up and become 2. There we go. I forgot they don't follow you in the camp. So what these little guys are capable of is a few things. Again, they don't have that much HP, but they're still a good extra bit of damage and utility. They can use Freezing Claws, which is just a regular slashing attack that deals a bit of extra cold damage. Ice Breath, allowing them to basically do a very, very minor version of Cone of Cold. The Chromatic Orb Cold, so they get to cast that version of Chromatic Orb, allowing them to also create icy surfaces. And also Death Burst, basically a kamikaze that does a bit of ice damage. These are just useful extra utility to have. They're a bit of extra firepower, a bit of extra distraction of enemies, so they can kind of take the heat off of you, so to speak. And are just fun to have anyway, and are on theme. So yeah, that is the build. Overall, I feel like that you're going to have a lot of fun with this one. Like I say, it's one of the best control mages ever. You get to deal a ton of different status effects and just feel like an overall super powerful mage that has a lot of utility. Basically, this video is kind of weird because I'm kind of recording a bunch of videos in the same day to kind of get ahead on like my schedule. So I believe I just recorded my Assassin's Creed build. That will have gone up the day prior to this one, and now I'm recording this one, so my head's a little bit all over the place as I'm trying to get these builds done. Like I said, I'm still going to be tanking my way through build requests, so I've got a few lined up. This was one of them, and I'm going to be doing probably the recording for the next one in just a minute here, but I was quite happy to get this build done, and I'm quite impressed with how it turned out. I mean, I kind of thought that a Cryomancer mage would be a bit boring to build, but actually, when you really think about it, this is super fun, like super fun. So I really, really hope you guys enjoy it. And I think I just want to kind of say it again. I kind of just, you know, I say this quite a bit now, but seriously, thank you all for the support. It's been a wild ride making these videos, and I'm still really, really enjoying it. And every day waking up and kind of, like, I kind of upload these late at night, and then waking up and seeing all the comments you guys leave and having those discussions is super, super fun. And really, really engaging. And I've been enjoying it so much. So I kind of just wanted to throw that out there just to say, you know, thanks for being awesome. We are an awesome community, and I feel like this little corner of the internet we've created for ourselves is one of, you know, just interesting concepts, interesting discussions, and a lot of acceptance. So I feel like I'm really, really quite proud of what we've managed to build here. I think that's going to be enough out of me. I don't think there's much else for me to say. So if you want to submit some build requests, feel free to do so. I am working my way through a backlog, but I'm still willing to continue doing some more. So with that, I feel like I am done. Thank you so much for watching the video, and I will see you all next time.